And to those who have already joined, we will start in a couple of minutes.
Hello, do you hear me?
Yeah, hey.
So I'm
Yes.
here and I'll lower my hand now.
Yeah, everything will be done via chat. So
Okay,
yeah, but I mean, we have not started yet. So I mean, if you want to
it's
share a
okay.
message to us, I mean. Good afternoon. I can see that people are joining, so which is really great. Thank you very much for taking your time to learn a little bit about digital training in the context of the NextETRUCK project. And if you have questions, please state them in the chat. And this is the first webinar out of 2. The second one will take place next week, Monday, on the 16th of September. Most of you have probably signed up for both webinars, which is pretty great. Yeah, this is an introduction. And then on Monday, we will go a little bit into the details. So as you all know, on board of this webinar, it will be recorded. And we will upload this webinar on YouTube. So I hope you're okay with it. And we will keep the entire conversation actually through the chat and not the Q&A box, because this is much easier. And yeah, if you have questions, please state them in the chat in writing, because that makes it easier. My colleague who will give the webinar can basically stop at a certain point, and then I will read out the questions to him so that he can concentrate on the topic of digital training. The aims of this webinar are pretty straightforward. We want to engage with journalists. That's what the first webinar is for. And then we also want to provide some exchange with experts, where we're looking at more of the details of digital training on the 16th. And we want to talk briefly about the NextETRUCK use cases. and the project itself. So you will know a little bit about that as well. And we, of course, want to engage with you. And basically, today, as I've mentioned, the agenda will focus on the holistic introduction to digital twinning. And then on the 16th, on Monday, there will be a short recap of the first webinar. And then we are going a little bit more into a deep dive. I wouldn't say that I'm doing that because I'm not an expert, but our expert is Leo Xenakis, and he will present you the digital twinning solutions now and introduce NextETRUCK to you. Welcome.
Okay, thanks, Nicholas. Let's see now. Hopefully you can see this now.
Yes, all perfect.
Excellent. Right. Well, a warm welcome, congrats then, everybody. Thank you for joining. As Nicholas has already said, I'm going to be talking a little bit about digital twins, the development framework that we developed for as part of the NextETRUCK project. We'll focus on some real-time and 1,000 times execution speed digital twins. So, just a very quick introduction. Been in the automotive industry about 20 years, about half of that at an OEM, about 5 years at AVL. Just focusing on collaborative research projects, and we tried to develop and demonstrate some of the cutting-edge AVL solutions. So let's get into it. So today we'd just like to cover what digital twins actually are, then a little bit about the NextETRUCK project. And then we cover more generally the digital twin creation framework, and then a few innovations, sort of tasters for the next presentation. Oh, and I should mention that, yes, we'll take the questions at the end of each of these sections. So just to get some definitions out of the way, what actually are digital twins? What makes them different from sort of virtualized vehicle models that you probably already work with? A digital prototype is essentially like this generic start condition, very similar to standard calibrated models. You tend to have one digital prototype for many real vehicles. This could be all of very similar type. Then digital twins, these are basically a physical representation that is kept synchronized with the state of a physical system. So this is basically what differentiates digital twins from digital prototypes. There is one digital twin for every physical vehicle out there. It doesn't need to be a vehicle. In this case, it is. It could be anything that you want to model, and there is a physical version of it out in the real world. And what allows this digital twin to sort of stay synchronized with the physical vehicle is the digital shadow. This is the name we have for the telemetry data, which comes from the digital twin and, it comes from the physical vehicle and is used to update the digital twins, keep them synchronized. It's important here to just differentiate how we use this data that comes from the vehicles. I've kind of broadly split them into two. This is online data. This is the data that is used to perform predictions based on the current state of the vehicle. So if you want to know the current state, it's like a live link to the vehicle. And then there's a historical offline data. This is used to update the parameterization of the calibration of the digital twins. And we'll see really in a bit more detail what the different steps are to get to these and how this data is used. But it's important to understand that there is this online data which is coming sort of streaming from the vehicle and is used essentially immediately to do calculations. This is like the inputs to any particular model in terms of time. And then the offline historical data, this is used to update the parameterization, or that's possibly called the calibration sometimes of these models. And I have to mention here that this software-defined vehicle is really forming the backbone of a lot of the technologies, particularly the DevOps-related technologies, which allow digital twins to exist, I suppose. And the reason for this is that this continuous updating of the software, this is essentially what forms the backbone of what digital twins, I suppose, need to be able to do. They need to take data from the vehicles and then to update themselves. And this needs to happen automatically because there could well be, thousands, millions of vehicles. There can't really be any manual steps in this process. So now that we know what they are, why are we really even interested in digital twins? So I've decided here for this, for the purpose of this presentation, to split it into two. These fast digital twins, they're used for future prediction, and these high fidelity digital twins generally used more for detailed investigation. So let's have a look at those. The fast ones generally, at least in our case, 1,000 times or more faster than real-time execution. Accuracy, well, we have got better in this case, but it's something less than 5% is probably a good target. Sorry, better than 5%. And it's generally used to predict key variables of the vehicle in the future, either for control or for management. So use cases here, look ahead controllers. We have an example of a thermal system developed by AVL here. Drive rate is another one. These are ones where you want to look ahead and possibly look at different strategies for the next 5 minutes, 10 minutes, and maybe simulate several of them and choose the best one. And of course, this can be done on a fleet level as well, where you have management prediction algorithms. This could be for, say, taking 10 vehicles, varying ages, maybe even different specifications, 10 different delivery schedules, and see which one is most efficient, this sort of thing. And of course, can be used to predict component failures or readjust maintenance schedules, reduce downtime, all these things for which the state of the current vehicle needs to be known. And then we've got the high fidelity digital twins. These closer to real-time execution, better accuracy. And of course, because it's a more accurate representation, this can be used for more complex virtual diagnostics tuning. Some use cases here. So complex issue diagnosis, even anomaly detection. We'll get into some of the details of this either later here or the next presentation. But essentially, because we have, in many cases, actual controllers running in these high fidelity digital twin models, we can also look at integrating, updating new software control strategies, validating them before deployment down to different vehicles. And if we look at some of the common attributes, of course, we already talked about this. The models have to be self-adapting. It's often overlooked, but because you have essentially historic versions of each of the vehicles available, you can do tests or even simulations on previous versions of the vehicles, or even just previous components of certain vehicles, combine them with newer softwares, see how things will react. This can be extremely valuable in working out whether software is robust even for aged vehicles, and through the timeline, the history of the aging of that vehicle. You also have the ability to have high-speed comms with other cloud resources. You could argue that, of course, you can have vehicles having this communication, but then you have a large amount of communication going from the vehicles up to the cloud. If you have these models already running in the cloud, they can access resources freely without increasing traffic down to the vehicle. You can also offload a lot of compute from the vehicle, so you don't need very powerful ECUs potentially in the vehicle. And of course, you can easily do fleet level calculations because you have the models of all the vehicles already in the cloud. So again, you don't need vehicle-to-vehicle communication. You can have all this in the cloud and even model things at a fleet level if required. So what are some of the key issues? Of course, you have to have this live communication between the cloud and the vehicle. There's several things here to look at. I mean, one is speed. For this project, we use 4G. It's sufficient, so not a problem. But again, with 5G coming, this should allow much faster communication or much larger data amounts, more channels being uploaded and downloaded from the vehicles. We have to develop some kind of buffering. Again, if you allow free for all in terms of communication down to the vehicle or up from the vehicle, this could lead to problems with asking for the same data many times and things like this. In this case, we're looking at buffering some of this data into a cloud container. This allows for queries for data from the vehicle to happen in this buffer rather than down to the vehicle directly. But the buffer, of course, is filled with data that comes from the vehicle. And here, this is where data integrity also comes in. You know, when we lose communication with the vehicle, how is this data treated? What sort of processing needs to be done to the data in order to make sure that it's still usable and has captured all the data without throwing away data unnecessarily. And of course, there's security as well. In this case, we are actually able to write variables back into the CAN bus of the vehicle. And so essentially having strong security here is a must. Otherwise, you could end up with the ability to essentially hack vehicles, and this is a serious safety issue. And again, there's the DT update methodology. Of course, this has to be automation capable, but in many cases, as was mentioned before, you could have 1 million vehicles. If you have any steps which are manual, it's in terms of the methodology, this is not going to work. But of course, updating models can be difficult, and automating this process is even more difficult in some cases, because you could argue that model creation needs some intelligence, but here at AVL, we developed certain algorithms which should allow the creation of with these updating of these models with minimal input from humans. And again, with the development of the digital methodology, we looked at various different ways to do this that were, of course, automation capable. And yeah, this could be calculation of model deltas, and of course, reparameterization of the models themselves, and this could include maps. Of course, if anybody's tried this, trying to update maps automatically, given very messy road data, for example, can be quite a challenge. And then there's traceability. If the DevOps pipeline is developed correctly, then you should be in a position where the traceability of all the models, the parameters, everything should already be in place. But particularly with car manufacturers, maybe we are a little bit slow on the uptake here compared to partners who are completely used to working in the software DevOps area. But to bring these two worlds together, this was also a particular focus here for NextETRUCK. And yeah, just to cover again, everything that we've talked about needs to be automated. We need to have this pre-post processing of large amounts of data, both for saving data from the vehicle and also for taking the data that's already saved and then processing this into useful data for updating the DTs. And of course, we need the ability to then deploy all these modules and models, DTs, back into the cloud and execute them as well. A quick note on execution speed. So we all know that there's a relationship between complexity of models, and also the execution time. And in truth, there's no reason why you can't have 3D or 1D models which are DTs. But again, if we go back to the difficulty in calibrating or parameterizing a lot of these models, it's easy to see why these are not maybe so common, because automatically, updating the calibrations or parameterizations of maybe hundreds of maps together automatically is not really something that's that easy to do. So we don't tend to find models of this type. For the NextETRUCK project, we're really going to focus on 0D models, and also semi-physical and empirical models. Quick clarification. There's a misconception that digital twins need to be like a full model of the whole vehicle, and this is absolutely not the case. Digital twins need to only have enough fidelity, execute fast enough, and model only the systems and outputs of interest to be useful, right? So this is no different from the models that you probably currently use already. So in terms of development timeline, where do digital twins come in? Where do they fit into the overall picture? So we start with the system definition. Hopefully you already have systems in place that do this SysML. And then we talk about the digital prototypes. Again, this is probably close to where you are already, or what have you been doing traditionally. And for most OEMs, we really want to start using digital twins already before we go to production. I think if you've done any amount of testing on real vehicles, then even keeping track of what's happened with these vehicles and what softwares are on them, this can be a nightmare. And actually, if you have the framework in place to deploy digital twins, you can do things like, of course, look at the full history of the vehicles, have pipelines in place to already test in software or in SIL or HIL certain components, updates to calibrations, updates to software, all in the cloud before, and then have them deployed directly to the vehicles. Again, if you have this capability in place. And then, of course, once you get into production, you have the ability of both from the OEM side and maybe as something, a service that you could sell to the end customer, where you have the ability to have better overview of the state of each of your vehicles, and to do all the things that we talked about in those use cases.
Could you maybe explain the abbreviations that we have here in the middle of the screen? CAE, SIL Cloud, and VTB?
Okay. The CAE is computer-aided engineering. This is, you could just say this is basic CAD and all the simulations related to the more complex, so maybe more 3D, 1D type simulations. SIL Cloud is software in the loop. It's cloud-based testing. This, again, if you want extra compute, you can push a lot of these complicated calculations into the cloud. VTB is virtual testbed. This is a product that we have here at AVL. It's basically a hill. I've got component testbeds, I think you understand. Pavel, this is a powertrain vehicle in the loop. This is where you have usually 4 dynos, maybe one simulating certain parts of the powertrain here at the front. And sometimes you can mount the whole vehicle, or you can just mount maybe just a high voltage component, whatever it is here, and you can have independent control over the 4 wheels. SOP is start production, I think. So I think we're at the end of this section. If there's some questions, maybe we can have a few of them.
Unfortunately, fortunately, there are no questions. Depends how you see it. So I will just have a brief question. Because I'm also as much of a newbie to this topic than maybe some of our attendees. So my question would be, also for the future, do you think that there are any physical, let's say, bottlenecks that exist? So I don't know, speed of data transfer or and anything like this, or does this always work even with an offline copy, and then the live elements through the cloud are not available, or how is that going basically if a truck drives around?
Well, so I think that there's a lot of work that's required on the OEM side in terms of how they're going to look at this split between what's done on the vehicle and what's done in the cloud. Because, I mean, for example, if you lose communication, you still have to run the vehicle safely. And so this split between how it moves between taking instructions from the cloud and also doing calculations locally, this needs to happen very carefully. And you could argue that how much computing do you actually save by moving this off the vehicle if you still need to do certain calculations sort of locally on the vehicle. There's a lot of things to consider, and I think that the doing this on trucks, so things which are generally used only in fleets, is definitely the way to go. I think it will eventually move down into customer vehicles, so passenger vehicles, but there'll be a different use case or different use cases there, and in terms of what the end customer is going to be interested in. But I think generically, yeah, things like data amount and whatever. I mean, 5G networks, they're coming, but at least for this use case, for example, 4G is fast enough. Encryption, again, general encryption that's used at the moment, we didn't think was sufficient. So Device Connects uses its own proprietary encryption to essentially do double encryption, because of course mobile networks are encrypted, but this has been broken so far, so it may not provide all the protection required. I mean, there's a lot of things to consider, even legal things. I think in the background, a lot of OEMs take a lot of data from vehicles, but this is in a bit of a gray zone at the moment. How much data can you take from the vehicles without it breaching, data protection laws and things like this? So there's a lot of things to consider here. And of course, if you are again taking a lot of data from the vehicles, where do you store all this stuff? It could be enormous amounts of data, and I don't think again many of the OEMs are necessarily ready or set up with the right technologies to do this either.
I've actually opened a bit the Pandora's box here for questions, so we got two more. Rami asks, what is the difference between physical and semi-physical models?
Okay, so semi-physical could be where, well, maybe we should look at empirical and physical. So empirical are models which have no real basis in the sort of physics of the thing that it's modeling. So a good example of this is essentially a model where you just feed it a bunch of inputs and you say these were the outputs, and it just works out what the relationship between the input and the output is. It knows nothing about what these relationships might be. A physical model is one where you have already some equations in place. So, it might be just very simply F equals ma, for example, and you can feed some data, but it has to be essentially finding the coefficients of this equation. And so you have a much more restricted, let's say, model, but you can also parameterize it with much less data. And what a semi-physical model is essentially a combination of these two. So you might look at, again, let's take the F equals ma example, and then there's a plus C. So the plus C, we don't know what this plus C is going to be. It's like maybe the offset from the F equals ma. You have what you think it should do, and then there's this offset that you're not quite sure what the relationships are or what it's based on, all the rest of it. And you need to apply this offset. This bit might be a model that could take any number of inputs, and you're not constrained by any kind of physical equation here to populate this value C. If that makes sense.
There's a second question, and this will be the last for the segment. Mohammed is asking in the slide about simulation accuracy, why are the accuracies shown as below 5% or below 2%? Is that supposed to be inaccuracy?
Essentially, yes. So sorry, maybe it should be, I should have written it in a different way, but essentially, yes, this is saying that the error is generally thought of as, if you're within 5% here and within 2% here, these are considered to be, the right sort of accuracy that you should expect. But again, this varies hugely depending on what you're trying to model.
Okay, those were the two questions. I think then there are no further questions, so I think you can continue to talk a little bit about our project, which is good.
Okay, so this is a 4-year project. We're about in the middle. 18 EU partners, fluctuates a little bit, as we'll see. We had 3 live demonstrators planned for 6 months at the end of this. I've grayed out Teva here because, as you may be aware, excuse me, unfortunately they went bankrupt a couple of months ago. We are looking for another partner to fill this spot, but as of yet, I don't believe we found one. And of course, any new hardware or software that's required for these demonstrations, this is all being developed in the 3 years, well, 3.5 years previous to the demonstrators running at the end there. And as part of this, digital twin development framework and a full fleet management framework are being developed as well. So a few specifics. I've shown here the Rizal route and the Ford route. So this one's in Spain, and this one's somewhere in Turkey. The trucks we're looking at are generally between these GVWs. They run 200 or 300 kilometers a day. Overnight charging is assumed. And there's essentially 2 types of cycles that we're looking at here. So there's a variable or a refuse delivery type delivery where there's only a fixed base and we're not quite sure where the truck is going to go. And then there's the fixed endpoint ones, which is depot to depot. And this should cover a lot of the examples that we're trying to, well, I think these are good examples, example routes for trying out the strategies we're looking at. And in terms of the goals, there's an overall TCO reduction, sort of bringing it much closer to what we expect for diesel trucks, and an overall 10% improvement in engine efficiency, which I should note is not strictly at the vehicle level only, it's really at the sort of fleet level. So, how you actually manage charging, discharging, and all of these things, which potentially can, again, allow better energy efficiency overall. So if you do a slower charge, for example, then you gain better energy efficiency. And of course, we have to demonstrate, develop and then demonstrate all of the new technologies which are discussed or needed for these demonstrators. So looking at the general architecture here, we have the physical vehicle down here. We have the sort of slower running, closer to real time DTs. Here, these are things like the thermal cooling system, HVAC system.
Leo, I just need to interrupt you quickly. We are not seeing the mouse all the time, so maybe you can refer to the colors or use some kind of pointers or something. Yeah, that
Here
works.
we go.
Yeah.
Sorry, yes. So here in the middle, we've got this. We've got these slower running DTs. Up here, we've got the faster running DTs. And here on the right, we have most of the management systems. Just looking. Yeah, so just talking briefly about this, as we said before, there's the real-time and the on-demand. So the faster digital twins, they tend to run on demand. And what we mean by this is that essentially there's a requirement to not essentially run all the time for these on-demand DTs. They're only running when, for example, another module or maybe the management system needs an energy consumption. And in this case, it will say, I have this route, or I have these 10 routes, please give me the energy consumption for each of those. And then maybe the management system chooses then the best route. The real-time streaming DTs, these tend to be more sort of controller related. This is where they're constantly receiving data, they're maybe running slower, but also would contain calls to maybe some of these DTs in order to predict into the future. So again, with a thermal system, you could be in a situation where you're looking at different control strategies, different control modes, trying those at a much faster speed, and then seeing which one is best and sending this down to the vehicle. So I don't know if there's any questions there as well. We get onto the...
No, there are no questions, so you can continue, and if there are questions about this project, then please also write that in the chat. I think what you could mention also is that the situation in Barcelona with the refuse collection, it is not really what you would call a standard, let's say, a garbage truck that you see in cities, but these are large pieces of old electronics. So, for example, a fridge, for example, and the route is basically not fixed because the vehicle is going from the depot to collect the items and then returning again. So we have varieties, and also if I'm not mistaken, that the trip from the two depots from Fort Ottossan in the functional urban area of Istanbul are also not always the same, but they're fluctuating because we decided to alter the route, even though the origin and destination is always the same of the truck. They will take different routes in order to gather further data. I'm not 100% sure if this has been clearly stated, because it is quite important to look over a longer period, and also to factor in the climate situation. Even though it's in Istanbul, it's Mediterranean climate, we don't have huge fluctuations, but at least we will see difference between the start of the pilot, if it's going to start on time, which will be during the coldest months, and then it will end up in the summer next year if we are going to keep our current schedule. I think this needs to be mentioned briefly, so people have at least a bit of a better understanding how these trucks will operate in the real world.
Yeah, I think this is particularly important. I mean, yeah, if you've ever been working on range estimation, the climate can be extremely influential. So having this period covering all the temperature ranges is extremely important. Okay, so quickly on to the general controller flow for any kind of SIL work environment here. So essentially at the beginning, we start with creation of all the plant models and controllers. And this could include also, of course, the communication models. So this could be REST bus simulation or CAN or LIN, anything on the vehicle really, that if you really want to simulate the full vehicle, you need to also have the correct communication systems modeled as well. At the top, we have the plant model, we call them. These are sort of physical components, and then down at the bottom, we have the controllers. These are generally then pulled together in some way, and then sent over to the actual simulation environment. Again, this has to be a co-simulation environment. Generally, it must have the ability to either connect externally to other components and simulation systems if required, but also to keep the correct time, let's say, within being the master of the simulation runs. And then, at least at AVL, we've generally split the execution into three sections. Two of them are related to testing. So one of them we call virtual testing assistance. This is really looking at more validation, verification type tests, and then the calibration assistance here in the middle. This is used for more tuning, parameterization of certain models, and also for the controllers. And for any system like this, you also need a layer on top, which is really using, I suppose, an automation framework and also a management framework in order to be able to deploy the correct tests to the correct environments. And we see this down at the bottom. We need to be able to deploy on-premise, also into the cloud. And at least the AVL systems, they support this. So this is where we get into a little bit more detail about exactly what the workflow for NextETRUCK is going to be. So for here at the beginning, we're looking at model creation. We use MATLAB for the controllers in this case and CruiseM for the vehicle components. We'll get a nice demo probably next time now as we're running a little bit over. But essentially there's standard components of most vehicle types available, including for hydrogen, so fuel cells and this sort of thing, available so you can quickly pull together models of the vehicles. And in this particular case, we're combining them into FMUs. And the simulation engineers sit so essentially between these two. And the co-simulation environment, this is Model Connect, especially designed to, with certain useful features that are not available in some of the other simulation tools, including the ability to not have to share some components, but still allowing simulations to run in the cloud with separated access rights. But essentially, these are then converted into high fidelity digital twins, and some other tools are used to essentially create the fast digital twins. And these are the empirical or the semi-empirical models, the ones that need to run much more quickly. And this can be done very quickly and to some extent in an automated way using the tool Cameo. And we have two types of management in terms of the parameterization and the models themselves. There are different requirements for each. We'll get into why this is, but I think it's generally accepted now that you need to handle the models and the parameters separately. And we do the model management in GitHub and the parameter management in Krita. And here again, we have the end users really only interacting with these testing tools here, and so they don't need to see the complexity behind it. I think sometimes it's extremely useful because generally the people doing the testing, they're not the people who are, you know, making these models and everything. And as we've seen with many customers, you know, just this hurdle of having to install or even think about using some of these simulation tools puts a lot of engineers off, and a lot of models and things tend to then go unused. So once the vehicles are available, then again, the same places that the parameters are managed, this can still be used to bring latest DTs, models, parameterizations down to the vehicles. We have an AVL product device connect. This allows the communications up to the cloud. We use Concerto for post-processing. So this data is taken into the cloud, and there's going to be a lot of it, obviously, and any processing scripts can be automated here. Again, using the longer term data, we can automate the creation and update of these models with some AI-based stuff. And again, this isn't a real buzzword in this case. The AI components within Cameo have been worked on for the last 12 years, and this is what allows, with minimal human input or none at all, the creation and update of models. And we'll talk a little bit about this probably in the next presentation, but there is this DevOps pilot program which has been developed together with Microsoft. This gives you a nice clean interface so that, again, the end users, they don't need to see any of the complexity of the tools behind. But of course, it's important that each of the tools themselves do have nice interfaces for the expert engineers in each of those areas. But there must be the ability to then essentially automate the workflow that they're using in order to execute certain things. So this could be the pulling together of all the different components with a particular test and with a particular set of software and controllers, or it could be, you know, updating a particular digital twin based on data from the vehicle. So I'd very quickly like to cover, so this is the basis of this high fidelity P2 hybrid truck model, is the basis of the NextETRUCK models that I'm going to show you soon. But I just wanted to quickly cover some of the capabilities that we're seeing here, because essentially we don't just cover eTrucks. We have the ability to look at any number of different hybrid configurations. And of course, in many respects, modeling engine-related behavior is more complicated and allows for more optimization possibilities when combined with e-motors as well. So many projects done on this, and there's a few screenshots here based off of the demo example that there's a presentation we can link to as well. It was given 6 months ago, where we go through all of the capabilities here, but I'd like to quickly just cover that. For example, right at the beginning, you can set the simulation up as if it was running either on an engine test bed or on a vehicle in this case. And again, without opening the simulation tools, you can choose which FMUs are used, or swap them out if you want to, even manually. And here we have initialization parameters for the simulation. Again, it's nice that you can see whether things have been changed from the default values. Here we have a manual control window. So this is like you're essentially on a test bed. I suppose you can choose gears, vehicle speeds, torques, engine speeds, and see what effect this is having. There's another one, which is like a dashboard for cycle execution. This again allows you to choose certain gearing or modes, or go into auto and run any number of cycles. Here, this is more of a parameterization or a calibration window. You can change maps, curves, single variables, again, monitor their effects. And yeah, there's good visualization plugins here that allow you to either look at just the data now, or you can compare it against previous tests or against the default test, and also quickly produce reports or perform further calculations. So
yeah, I have a question.
Sure.
I was just about to interrupt you, but you stopped at the right point. Could you go back one more slide, please? Yeah.
This one?
For example, here, what kind of curves do we see here in this example? Just that people know how. Yeah. What would be the example here?
So, well, I mean, here, this is really just an overview. So we're seeing vehicle speed at the bottom, we've got accelerator position next up, or together with brake pedal position, it seems. And then gear, and the brake pedal position is above. And then we also have this state of charge. So you can see it's just above 40 at the beginning, and it's dropping to just below 40%. So basically anything that you have logged or have as a potential output of simulation, you can plot on here, and yeah, and quickly see what the vehicle is doing, or what the simulated vehicle is doing. I mean, I'm about to quickly switch over to show this. So,
and there's also another question that was just stated from the last part when you were just starting, so I didn't want to interrupt you.
That's right.
He is asking, what do you mean by thermal modes in the other slide? Basically, is this related to the cabin heating or something else?
So this is more related to the control mode of the thermal system. So, for example, in this actual case, we've kind of done away a little bit with thermal control modes, but generally what happens is you tend to have thermal control modes depending on what state your vehicle is in. So say, for example, that your battery is colder than you want it to be, your e-motor is hotter than it wants it to be, and your ambient temperature is sort of a middling sort of temperature, let's say, in which case you might go into, I don't know, mode 3, which then will move the pumps and the valves in order to try and bring some of that excess heat, say from the e-motor, to heat up the battery, for example. But then you might have a different mode, say mode 5, which is maybe doing the opposite. And actually, generally, you'll be looking at 3 or 4, maybe 5 different components where you've got heat exchangers and things like this. And it's just easier to parameterize or to have control modes, so you know broadly what is happening with what the system is trying to do in that particular case, where it's trying to take heat from and where it's trying to send it to.
Yeah, because the battery should be in there's a perfect stage that the battery could be in, and depending on the ambient temperature, the battery might need to be cooled or heated in order to
Yes.
to work perfectly, right? Yeah.
Yes, and generally these are entered into, as far as the controller is concerned, usually through what are called modes. Yeah. So hopefully that answers that question. Is there anything else, or I think we need to speed up here. So essentially, this shows the model, which is in Model Connect. We'll show the insides of these next time in how they were made in cruise-n. These are already turned into FMUs. You can also set them up as XCP slaves. We won't cover what that is here. If you know what that is, you can basically access them like controllers. You can look at ports and things. You can bundle them to, again, make it look a little bit neater. And I've created a very simple dashboard here, but again, you can see how, just like I was showing in the other tool there, you can see how the simulations are proceeding. But we prefer to use a separate tool, which is much more familiar with people working with vehicles. Used to be called SMS, Smart Mobile Solutions. Now it's integrated into Cameo. Let me quickly connect, and let's at least see it running quickly. But while this is connecting, well, here you can see actually you can change different configurations, and this will change which FMUs are used, for example. So this is again ability here to, without opening the underlying modeling tools, to swap out FMUs as long as the inputs and the outputs are compatible. So we OK this. So we run this. So here you can see there's a bunch of predefined cycles, very flexible interface here. You can really make it to suit whatever you want, whether it be a cycle or manual running or whatever it might be. And we have the ability also here to switch between these three modes. So running a cycle, or setting a manual speed, or manually moving brake and accelerator pedal positions. And also the ability to manually set a road gradient here. And yeah, we won't change any of them here, but you have the ability. So these are the gray initialization settings. You can set things like the frontal area, etc., determining the resistance of the vehicle overall as F0, F1, F2. And you can set some battery parameters, the weight, and also the starting conditions here of various parts of. So you can have everything set to one temperature here, or you can set individual temperatures for each component as a start temperature. So we start the cycle. You can see it's getting going. And any calibratable variables, again, you can just set up any windows you want. Here, for example, we have the example of setting a cabin temperature, but yeah, again, as before, you can set a different temperature. You can see which way you've adjusted that temperature very easily. And maybe I should also show that we can set a manual speed, for example. And yeah, so this allows, we like to call this a sandbox, allows you to play with the vehicle as if it was on the road, or maybe it was on a test bed. Yeah, this is preferred. And to also, manually, but also you can automate, so you can access via API all of these commands and automate any particular test you want to run. And again, at the end of this, you can create reports again automatically. So we had to run through that pretty quickly. Let me just try and get through this. So I don't know if there's any other questions. Hello?
Oh, sorry. No,
Right.
there are no, there are no further
Okay, good.
bits. Yeah.
We've got a few
Which-
slides just
yes.
to finish off.
Yes.
So again, I won't cover this in too much detail because I think this is going to be focused on more in the next presentation, but we will look at, how we create some of these models. And we've seen already that there's very good error. So we basically parameterized the fast running DTs by running certain predefined cycles that have a very good coverage of the input and the output space in terms of where the vehicle can run and all the conditions it can run in, so temperatures, this sort of thing, but also torques, accelerations, braking, whatever it might be. And then we use different cycles to try and see how good the prediction was, and already we're well within 3%, even with quite extreme conditions. Usually it's much closer to 1%. And you also have the ability, if you would like, and we'll show this again in the next presentation, to play with the models to see actually if you put in various inputs, how it affects the outputs. So some of the advantages that we see here, there is a built-in error prediction. So you can see how much your model is interpolating, extrapolating. This can be quite useful when you're not quite sure, how much you can trust the output of the models that you've created. You can export to many different types of build into many different containers. And of course, if you want to automate any of these processes, including the model creation, you can. This one I think we'll skip over, but essentially we tried to split the model creation into various parts in order to help the automation process, but also to end up with a better prediction at the end in terms of when we run the model. We'll cover this next time. I'd just like to say that, I'd like to stress that there is this DevOps pipeline that we're developing here, and this allows you to combine anything that you can that exists in the artifact, what we call it Artifactory, is artifact library. And even if a particular combination has never been put together before, or a particular test has been performed before, it doesn't really matter. You can choose these through a front-end interface. It will automatically create the simulation environment with the required components on the fly and perform the required tests, again, automated, and then deploy this into a variety of environments, but also, allowing you to run custom pieces of code like DT creation and update, and then produce test reports as to how this all went. And we are official development partner for this product, which is going to be sold soon through Microsoft themselves as well. But yes, this hopefully allows us to combine the benefits that we have, the automotive knowledge on our side, and of course the software development from Microsoft's side. Okay. Well, let me just give the summary and then look ahead, and then we'll take questions right at the end. So I think Nicholas has already said we have basically this to look forward to next time. I hope you will join us again.
Please wait before you leave. I also have something to share super briefly.
Okay.
Of course, I know you weren't done
Well,
actually, right?
but yeah,
sorry.
there's a couple more slides, sorry.
No, go ahead,
This
go
is-
ahead.
this
Sorry,
is the
I
full-
just thought you wanted to wrap up. No, sorry,
This
my
is the
fault.
full SIL pipeline in terms of all the products that we have. Of course, if you want a demo, whatever, get in touch, or you can also look at our Experience Cloud. This has many of the tools that were talked about here, or sort of showcased, and also gives you the ability to try out some of these if you contact them through the link. So that's it. Yes, back to Nicholas.
Yes, super briefly, what I wanted to show is that, of course, we want you to keep in touch with us. So besides the second webinar, which will take place on the 16th, there are also the options to follow us on formerly Twitter, now X, so x.com/NextETRUCK, or you use one of the middle QR code, or LinkedIn, of course, and our homepage is nextetruck.eu, where we are keeping you informed about recent updates, upcoming events. So, for example, there you will also have the chance to register for the second webinar still now, even though it already takes place on Monday, but most of you have done that anyway. So most of you have registered for both webinars. So we are looking forward to meeting you again next week, Monday, after the weekend. And with this, I am concluding the webinar. Thank you very much for joining. You can reach my colleague Leo under leo.zenakis@avl.com. And I'm Niklas Schmalholz, the project manager and communication manager from POLIS Network. And my email is nschmalholz@polisnetwork.eu. Thank you very much for joining, and we hope to see you next week, Monday. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.